morning, students. Today, in our English literature class, let's proceed further in our chapter number 13, that is Rain, Rain, Go Away, from where we have stopped in our previous class. So let's proceed from where we have stopped. The Sacros were young and pleasant, dark and handsome. Means they were dark but handsome. As they came down the long walk from the way home to where the right automobile was parked, automobile, car, George leaned towards his wife and whispered, "Look, he is carrying a pocket radio." He, Mr. Sacro, he was carrying a pocket radio to listen to weather forecast. Forecast means predictions. I bet. The Sacro boy came running after them, waving an Android barometer. Barometer is an instrument which measures the air pressure. All three got into the back seat. Means all the Sacro's family were sitting in the back seat. Conversation was neat, give and take on impersonal subjects. Means they were talking on impersonal subjects. The Sacro boy was so polite that even Tommy Wright was stuffed into a semblance of civilization. Stuffed means what to say. He was feeling like, okay, semblance means appearance. So even though Mrs. Sacro's small radio was on, it had been a scenerily pleasant drive. Mr. Sacro's radio was on, but the drive was a good, pleasant drive. It was a beautiful day at Murphy's Park, hot and dry, with a cheerful bright sun in the blue sky. Means the weather was fine. Even Mr. Sacro, though he inspected every quarter of the heavens with a careful eye and then started patiently at the barometer, seemed to find no fault. Means over here we can say that Mr. Sacro was busy with his radio and barometer to check for the climate, and as he checked he found that everything was right and everything was fine. Lillian bought the boys ticket for each ride that the park offered. When she returned, George said, "I think Mr. Sacro must be independently wealthy. I don't know what he does for a living." Means Lillian said that she doesn't know what was the work done by them, how they earn their livelihood. He said he's just a student of human nature. Means that he said, Mr. Sacro, that he was a human nature student. How philosophical. That would explain all those newspapers. This statement was made by Mr. Lullian. No, not Mr. Lullian, it was made by George, sorry. It was made by George. And it doesn't come from Arizona. I said I heard he was from Arizona. She said that she had heard that he was from Arizona, but he doesn't belong to Arizona. He looked so surprised. Then he laughed and asked if he had an Arizona accent. Accent means type of pronunciation, throwing of words. Okay? Lillian said thoughtfully, "He has some kind of accent, you know. I think they are Spanish. Sacro could be a Spanish name." Lillian said thoughtfully that they doesn't have an accent of Arizona, but they have a name suggests that they are from Spain. They might be Spanish. Sounds Japanese to me. Come on, they are waving. Waving means they are calling. The Sacros were each holding 3 sticks of cotton candy. It's a sweet. Hug swirls of pink foam consisting of dry threads of sugar made of frothy syrup that had been dipped about in a warm vessel. Means they were eating sweets. The Sacros held one out to each right, and one of politeness they accepted. Means they shared 2 rights also. They played darts, a kind of poker game where balls were rolled into holes, and knocked wooden cylinders off pedestals. They took pictures of themselves and recorded their voices. Then the Sacros went to the refreshment stand. Means they were enjoying thoroughly. they were enjoying their full. Frankly, said George, if I see them biting away at another cotton candy stick, I'll sicken on the spot. They were eating lots of candies. George said if they are going to have another cotton candy, he's going to be sick. They have a dozen apiece. They have eaten a lot. I offered Sacro a hamburger and he just looked grim and shook his head. When George offered Mr. Sacro a hamburger, he denied taking the hamburger. I offered her an orange drink and the way she jumped when she said no. You didn't think I'd thrown it in her face. Lillian said she offered Mrs. Sacro an orange drink, but she jumped as if she was throwing it on her face. I suppose they have never been to a place like this before and they will need time to adjust to the novelty. Novelty means new area. She said that she thinks Sacros have never visited this type of place and they will take some time to adjust themselves. I'm sure they will not eat cotton candy again for 10 years. They have eaten so much of cotton candy that for the next 10 years they are not going to have any cotton candies. They strolled towards Sacro. Strolled means moved. It's clouding up, Lil. Mr. Sacro had the radio on his ear and was looking anxiously towards the west. Oh, said George, he will want to go home. George saw that the dark clouds are approaching. He said that now Sacros are going to demand for going home. All three Sacros were polite but insistent. They were sorry they had a marvelous time. The rides would have to their guests soon. But now really they had to go home. Mrs. Sacro wailed that all the forecast had been for fair weather. Means all were planning to leave Murphy's Park. Mrs. Sacro was saying that all the forecast and all barometer was giving a sign of good weather, but what had happened to the weather? George tried to console them. Console, make them quiet. It's hard to predict a local thunderstorm, but it wouldn't last more than half an hour. He said it's impossible to predict a thunderstorm, but it's not going to take more than half an hour. The Sacro's youngster seemed to a verge of tears and Mrs. Sacro had trembled. Miss young Sacro was about to cry and Mrs. Sacro was trembling. Let's go home, said George in resignation. Resignation means in what to say? In a type of what to say? Accepting the matter, accepting the situation. The drive back seemed a much untenable. Untenable means endless, as if it was a long journey, it's not going to end. There was no conversation and Mrs. Sacro's radio was quite loud now as he caught the weather report at every station. They were mentioning local thunder showers now. Mr. Sacro was on his radio and the radio was announcing thunderstorms. The Sacro's youngster said that the barometer was falling and Mrs. Sacro stared dolefully at the sky and asked George to drive faster. Please. Mrs. Sacro requested George to drive faster as the young Sacro said the barometer is falling down. It doesn't look rather threatening, said Lillian in a polite attempt to share the guest attitude. Lillian tried to say, comfort them. A wind had sprung up when they entered the street and the leaves rustled ominously, lightning flickered. Means thunderstorm arrived when they entered their street. George said, you'll be indoors in due time. George said to Mr. Sacro that he will be at home within 2 minutes. He pulled up at the gate, stopped at the gate that opened into Sacro's front yard and got out of the car to open the back door. He opened the back door. He thought he felt a drop. They were just in time. As the rain was starting, single drop fell. They were on time. The Sacros tumbled out, faces drawn with tension. They were full tensed, muttering thanks and started running towards their home door. Means they thanked and ran towards the door. Honestly, began Lillian, how would you think they were? Lillian was confused. Lillian said she was not able to make out the reaction on Sacro's faces. The heavens opened and the rain came down in giant drops, and though some celestial dam had suddenly burst, and the Sacro stopped and looked despairingly upward, as if God has opened his door. A good downpour came down. It started raining heavily, and Sacros looked upward sadly. Their faces blurred as the rain hit, blurred and sank. All three shriveled, collapsing within their clothes, which sank down into three sticky, wet heaps. Means when the rainfall started, the Sacros family melted. And while the bride sat transfixed with horror, transfixed still, surprised, Lillian found herself saying, made of sugar and afraid they would melt. Means they were made of sugar and they were afraid that they might melt. Now the story comes to an end. Let's stop till here. Next day we'll proceed with other chapter. Till then, thank you.